Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem? Mulligan?
Here.
Stothard?
Here.
Thompson?
Here.
Festerson?
Here.
Mr. President.
Here. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, we pray with joy and thankfulness for your mercy to us as we begin our earthly work. Amen.
Amen. City Clerk certifies publication of the daily record on February 11th. Notice for a pre-council and regular City Council meeting February 15th, 2011. A current copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in white binder on the east wall of the Legislative Chambers.
We ask that if you have a cell phone or a pager, please turn it off or to vibrate. Mr. Clerk, first item.
Zoning ordinance on final reading and planning board attachments. We'll take items 5 and 6 together as one case. 5 is ordinance to rezone property located northwest of 42nd and Lake Streets from R435 to R5 Urban Family Residential District. A, Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. And resolution 6 is resolution 3 plat transmitted herewith entitled Woodlands Ridge is hereby approved. A, Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on items 5 and 6 begin now. Are there any proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Motion approved.
Roll call.
The council member Thompson is out of the chambers. Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
It's passed 6-0. Pursuant to City Council Rule 7E, agenda item number 7 shall be laid over 2 weeks for publication and public hearing. Special use permit, item number 8, resolution of special use permit application submitted by AT&T Mobility for a major amendment to a special use permit to allow a broadcast tower with a waiver of height to allow a 112-foot tower in a R7 medium-density multi-family residential district located at 2606 Hamilton Street is hereby approved. A, Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on item number 8 begins now. Are there any proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
It's adopted 6-0. 9, a special use permit application submitted for a special use permit to allow a daycare general in an R435 single-family residential district, high density, located at 4478 Ellison Avenue is hereby approved. A, Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on item number 9 begins now. Are there any proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Motion approved.
Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem? Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
It's adopted 6-0. Councilmember Thompson's back in the chambers. Liquor, item number 10, Wine Styles, 1110 South 71st Street, Suite K, request permission for a change of location of their present Class C liquor license to 1006 South 74th Plaza.
Public hearing on item number 10 begins now. Are there any proponents?
Yes.
Name and address, please.
It is Robert Bolden, 6335 Poppleton Avenue.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, I'd just like to thank Mr. Bolden for coming down. You run a great operation, and sorry to have you move out of the district now, but I'm sure Mr. Thompson will welcome you.
That sounds like a plan.
I'd move to approve.
Thank you very much.
No further lights. Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Adopted 7-0. Item number 11, the Capitol, 1011 Capitol Avenue, request permission for an addition to their present Class I liquor license of a storage area in the basement.
Public hearing on item number 11 begins now. Are there any proponents?
Mr. President, members of the council, Mike Kelly, 7134 Pacific, appearing here for Capital Inc. This is just a storage area. We've already got the license. This should have been included in the first application, but for some reason it didn't get included. So it's just a small storage area in the basement. That's all we're asking for.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Any opponents?
I'm Bob Culver. I'm a resident at the condos that are directly behind the Capitol Lounge. I have some of my fellow neighbors here. We are opposed to any more expansion of this facility until they get their noise levels under control. They have been over the ordinance the dB ordinance levels for the last 5 weeks. We cannot get any sleep in our condos. Their entertainment venue is way too raucous for us to be able to live next to.
Thank you. Next opponent?
My name is Bruce Aho. I reside at 1008 Dodge Street, Unit 205. Again, echo Bob's comments that the noise level, the disturbance that we have in our condo units are above tolerable levels, and we have seen no relief in sight and oppose the situation until it can get resolved.
Thank you. Next opponent?
I'm Richard McGaffey. I reside at 1008 Dodge Street, apartment number 302. I agree with everything that's been said. We have people living in this facility who are unable to sleep, and they have to go to work the next day, and I oppose this license. Thank you.
Thank you. Next opponent?
Hi, my name is Cheryl King. I live at 108 Dodge, number 304. I echo everything that they say. I'm afraid if this expansion goes on, we're not going to have a way to turn back. So just ask that you consider our objection to this expansion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents? Mr. Kelly, would you like rebuttal?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mike Kelly for the record. This here is just about a story. This is an expansion of the operation. I've been alerted here recently that the neighbors have some issues. Now, he just spent $500,000, came in, told the landlord what his venue was, what he was going to do. Obviously, the building is not completely compatible with that, so we're going to have some issues. But they're not. This is not the proper forum for that. This is just storage. This is not an expansion of the area where he's going to serve liquor. This is just to store liquor, and it should have been on the original application but wasn't included as an oversight. We obviously are going to have to come back to Liquor Committee, work with the council on whatever issues. We also have a big issue with the landlord. So whether there may be some litigation over this, and I sympathize with these folks, and we'll try to work with them. But again, from his perspective, he comes in, spends $500,000 building out a place, told he can have a music venue. He has a music venue, and now the noise is the only issue that we're talking about here. So we're going to have to resolve that someplace. But this is not the time to do it on this issue of storage. This is just storage for the building.
Thank you.
So I guess I would ask you to approve this and order us to work on it, or request us to work on it, which we will.
Thank you. Public hearing's closed. Mr. Gray?
Thank you, Mr. President. Bob, if you can come up for a second for me. Now, you do understand that this has nothing to do with the liquor license. This has to do with storage.
We understand.
And that the issue that you're talking about, you know, the noise issue, that's something that's completely different.
We understand that, but we also have been misled from the beginning. It was not declared as a music venue. In fact, if you open up their website, it's a warm, service-minded atmosphere with a bustling bar and laid-back lounge. This is a techno dance bar. And so they've been misleading people from the beginning. So our concern is that when we got these notices, that we felt that it was our opportunity to come in and voice our concern at this point. We realize that there's a process. But at this particular point, we're just saying, man, we don't know where we can go with this. We've had the police out there multiple times. They've been cited. They've measured the sound. The sound is at 110 decibels, which the ordinance requires 70 decibels. And I realize the landlord and the owner is trying to work through all these issues, but my wife is a trauma doctor. She can't even get any sleep. I mean, they're not turning it down. They're not saying that, well, while we're working through this, we'll get it down to 70 decibels. They keep cranking it up. And so we're just taking every opportunity, which is this one, for us to voice our concern.
Okay.
That's simple.
All right. Can Mr. Kelly again? Is there a temporary compromise that we could reach here in terms of the noise? And I realize that's not what the issue is today. I understand that. But in terms of just being a good neighbor, is there a compromise here that we can reach at some point, or I mean, maybe all you need to do is just engage in conversation right now and see where you go.
Mike Kelly, I would pledge to meet with the neighbors as soon as this hearing is over and Mr. Himberger's here. Again, we've got some issues really regarding the landlord more than these folks. These folks are kind of caught in the middle, but we will attempt to work through that. They obviously have a serious, legitimate problem, and we intend to address it as best we can.
Okay. And Bob, just again, so that the neighbors know, I mean, I understand that you all have to, you all are looking for every opportunity to explain your grievances to a body that can probably get something done at some point. I don't know that this particular issue is the one, but I know it's on the record now, so it's duly noted, and we can follow this and track it.
That was our intent today.
And we have a liquor committee that can review this if we have to at some point in time. So I would encourage you to stay in touch with our clerk and so forth to make sure that if we have to revisit this or visit this as a liquor committee, we could do that.
Yeah.
But here right now is probably not the venue to address.
We understand that. We're just taking advantage of the opportunity.
Okay. Thank you.
We appreciate you all listening to us.
Thank you. And I just wanted to make sure we had this discussion so we know where we are.
Exactly.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Motion approved.
No further lights. Roll call.
Gray? Yes. Jerem? Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard? Yes. Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
And Jerem passes a second time for a potential conflict of interest. It is adopted on a 6-0-1 passing. Item number 12, Firewater Grill, 7007 Grover Street. Request permission to appoint Alex Adair manager.
Public hearing on item number 12 begins now. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon. I'm Axel Adair with the Firewater Grill, 11917 William Street.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Move the approval.
Second, roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
It's approved on a 7-0 vote. Item number 13 is the Tennis Club and Soccer Center, 4718 North 120th Street. Request permission to appoint Christopher Breeling manager.
Public hearing on item number 13 begins now. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Breeling. I reside at 12551 Bristol Circle.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Second.
Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
It's approved 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause an item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Item removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed unless otherwise provided by City Council rules of order.
The public hearings on items number 14 through 16 were held on February the 8th. Do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
No lights, roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
They're all passed 7-0.
The public hearings on agenda item number 17 through 25 and 28 through 30 begin now. Are there any proponents? That's items 17 through 25, 28 through 30. Are there any proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Roll call.
Gray.
Yes.
Jerem. Mulligan. Stothard. Thompson.
Yes.
Festerson. Mr. President.
Yes.
They're all adopted 7-0. Now we'll go back to item number 26, resolution that the bid from Tincher Ford for 16 year 2011 equipped black and white cruisers and 4 year 2011 equipped solid black slick topped cruisers is hereby approved.
Say that fast 3 times.
Yeah.
Public hearing on item number 26 begins now. Are there any proponents?
Captain Adam Kyle, Omaha Police, 505 South 15th Street.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll be called back up, Captain. Are there any other proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Mrs. Stothard.
Thank you very much. Captain Kyle, can you come back? And I just ask you to be prepared to answer a few questions today because many of the council members have received some questions about this item, particularly with what's going on in the legislature, and there's a lot of uncertainties this year, and this is of how our finances are going to end up at the end of the year. And this is a $500,000 approval of purchasing some items out of general fund. So I thought it was just really important for you to give just a little background so that the public can understand the necessity of buying these cruisers. Historically, in the 2011 budget, we had originally had 44 cruisers in the budget, and with the cuts that the city council did and the cuts that the police chief have done, it is now down to the 16 black and whites and 4 black cruisers. And so can you just give a little history of the shape that your fleet is in, the average miles in the fleet, the maintenance cost, etc.? Just give a review if you could, please.
Sure. I may stumble along here because there's a lot of numbers, but just bear with me here. We have 256 black and white cruisers. Some are 10 years old plus. The average the mileage for each cruiser is 114,333 miles. We have unmarked too, but I'm going to stick with the marked cars. The standard industry for replacing a cruiser generally is 100,000 miles. It used to be, I believe, 80 or 90. We are, again, averaging 114,000 miles. Last year we replaced, I believe, 44. At the current rate that we put mileage on cars, we would need to replace 40 of our cars every single year. Otherwise, the cars that we are going to have, their age is going to be anywhere from 10 to 15 years old. We have cruisers currently at 26th and Lake, our vehicle maintenance location, that have rusted frames on them, and they start to fall apart, so we can't drive them anymore. We cannibalize those generally, hold them off, and then take parts of them and put them on cruisers that may have accidents or get damaged. The current fleet that we have, I believe last year we wrecked about 10 cars or were involved in accidents or destruction of property. Of those 10, I believe 3 were from the new fleet that we had just purchased. So there were 3 2010s that were totaled. So we're going to need to replace those as well. If we stay at the current rate of just replacing 20 a year, we'll end up with 10 to 15-year-old cruisers that we can't drive anyway, and they'll be over 115,000 miles easily on them.
Okay. And I think it's a pretty known fact that when you try to hyperextend a vehicle life in a fleet like this, it often leads to higher and not lower cost with the maintenance repairs.
That is correct. I'll let Mark McCoy answer some of those questions. I think he's more learned about that since he's the supervisor at the vehicle maintenance shop. But generally speaking, if we get an old car and we keep it around because it runs, we're going to have to keep replacing parts. Transmissions go out, rear ends go out. Now cruisers are not like your, soccer mom van that she's going to drive to and from school or whatever. These cars are pushed to the limit. They're revved up at high speeds and then back off, and it's like that when the cars expedite, or when if we have to chase somebody or go to an accident scene or respond to a felony in progress. These cars take a beating, and not because we have bad drivers. It's just because of the way the job is designed that we have to respond to certain calls. So getting 30 to 35,000 miles on a car, on a cruiser every year, these are not your, totaling along on the interstate 35,000 miles. These are real miles, probably equivalent to 100,000 miles. So a car at 90,000 miles, a cruiser at 90,000 miles should probably be replaced, but we're stretching it to 100. Even now we're stretching it to 114, and that mileage next year, if I'm up here and we replace only 20, will be 118, and then so on and so forth.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Mr. McCoy, you're...
Mark McCoy, City of Omaha Fleet Management, 2606 North 26th Street.
Do you just want to give your input on the maintenance and the condition of the vehicles now in the fleet?
Sure. What we tend to see is as the vehicles are kept for longer periods of time, the cost to operate them vehicles increase. We track the cost per mile that it costs to operate that vehicle. On a new car, for example, a 2010 car, it's roughly 5 cents per mile in maintenance and repair. That doesn't include fuel, that doesn't include accidents. That's just maintenance and repair, oil changes, batteries, brakes, whatever would be done, non-warranty items. That's 5 cents per mile. When that car starts aging, for example, a 2001 car, it's costing us almost 50 cents a mile for that car. So, I mean, you can do the math. If you drive it 50,000 miles a year at 50 cents per mile, what it's costing you to keep that car. In some cases, it costs more to keep it than you could replace it for. But if we don't replace them, it's too late. We have to fix them. If we don't replace them, then we have to just keep putting money into them cars and to keep them running. What we're seeing is, like Captain Kyle said, we have 250 cars. If we're replacing 20 per year, that puts us on roughly a 12-and-a-half-year replacement cycle. That's way too long. 12-and-a-half years to keep a cruiser when you're putting 40,000 miles a year on it. That's why we're kind of in the predicament we're in now. We've got frontline police cars right now. Car 721's got 229,000 miles on it, and that's unheard of in a police fleet. It's just crazy because the maintenance costs go up every year with these vehicles. So we'd like to see 40, 20. If we get 20, we'll be happy with that. But we really need to replace 40 cars a year.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for your input.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Festerson?
Thanks, Mr. President. And thanks, Captain Kyle and Mr. McCoy, for that overview. And I certainly don't question the need for cruisers at this point. I think you gave a good overview of why that's necessary. I did have some questions earlier in the week through staff on this issue, just with the chief. Because this is $500,000 that comes from the general fund, and at a time when I know we're trying to manage through avoiding any potential layoffs in the police department, I just asked the question, are we getting through that okay, or do we truly need to spend those $500,000 on equipment? And the response back from the chief I thought was a reasonable one, which was that, yes, he's managing through that situation at this point and will continue to do that, but feels this is the minimum amount of cruisers we have to do in the meantime, given what you just presented. Is that an accurate characterization?
Captain Kyle again. Yes, sir, it is. Just to let you know, I mean, when these times are difficult and we get posed with some boundaries about money, I mean, we don't look at this money as just like an endless pot of gold. We look at it as our checking account, like we'd manage our own family, and we begin trying to figure out unorthodox ways to save the city money, not just our budget. I'll give you an example. Currently, if you go to governmentdeals.com, you will see some stainless steel toilets that came from our jail, and we're selling them. The police department does not get the money. It goes in the general fund. we are demolishing our jail. The estimate was $300,000 to do this. So far, I think we've spent about $12,000 of our CIP money because we're hiring people at an hourly wage through the SEB program. During that demolition, the jail doors are about 200 pounds apiece, and they're steel. Steel prices are up right now. We've been hauling metal to the junkyard, and I think to the tune of almost, I think we're up around $8,000, $9,000, again going into the general fund. We're not wasting anything. So when the chief goes with these parameters with our budget, he asks us not to, hey, kind of slow down spending. No, it's, hey, don't spend anything unless you absolutely need it, and and you're going to have to get approval. And we're going to go line by line. Every dollar that we're spending, we're going to figure out how we can cut what we don't need and cut and do without until we can have, down the line, the ability to spend money to buy things that we do need. And so he's doing a great job asking us to do the same thing. So if that gives you a picture of what we're doing over there.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate that approach. And I just wanted to make sure we're keeping our eye on the officers of concern while we're doing these things, and it sounds like we are. So I'm comfortable with that. And
if I can just add something, you were correct. The last thing he wants to do is lay off a police officer. Because you do that, then you leave an area that's either not serviced properly or protected, or you got a guy that's going to have to do more than his share, and you can't be everywhere at the same time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Now I'll go ahead and move the approval. Second.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes, Captain, if you can come back up.
Yes, sir. Adam Kyle.
Yes, you had mentioned that 3 of our 2010 cars got demolished. Is that totaled?
Totaled, yes, sir.
And do you have the same program that just regular citizens would have, where you would get that replaced by insurance, or do we have to foot the bill for that?
Well, that's an odd thing that you would ask that. When a cruiser gets totaled, the replacement for that cruiser, and Mark McCoy will correct me if I'm wrong, please. I believe that when a cruiser gets wrecked, the police department does not get that money back to buy another cruiser. It goes back into the general fund.
Mm-hmm.
But you could probably ask the attorney, and he could probably tell you.
City law, do we have insurance on these cars?
Paul Kratz, City Attorney. No, we don't. We're self-insured on that, so it'll be our cost to repair the vehicle. Now, if the accident's caused by somebody else, we certainly go after that other person for any insurance they may have. Some have insurance, some don't. Some accidents are simply caused by our officers, and we're responsible for them. So it's a mixed bag of things.
So these 3, did they get counted against what we gave them before, or they started with scratch, or what?
Well, I'm not sure you're counting anything for or against. If they can be repaired, they can be repaired. If they're not, they're just gone.
They're just gone.
If money's received from insurance from somebody else, you're right, that would not go to the police department's budget. That will go into the general fund.
General fund, and then they have to wait until their next request before they can fill those those missing ones. Okay. I guess I didn't quite understand it that way before.
Just so you know, I mean, it's not like there's a district out there because the car's gone, the guy's walking on foot, or it's not being serviced. What happens is we'll dip into our pool cars, the ones that have 200 and some odd thousand miles on them. He's talking about a frontline one, but we have other cars that have more mileage than that, where vehicle maintenance does some miracle working, and we kind of get it back in service, and we'll drive that until we can get another car.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I don't want to paint this picture that we're impoverished. We're doing the best we can with what we have, and so we're okay with that. And so we know the rules of the game, and we just try to do the best we can.
Okay. Well, I support it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Captain, one quick note. Would you agree, or has this changed to your knowledge, the Department of Justice typically recommends, at least back in my past life, that cars should be changed in the area of about 80,000 miles. Is that fairly accurate?
That was the rule of thumb, but since that time, probably in the last 10 years, and Mark again can correct me if I'm wrong, cars are made better. I don't know if we're better drivers or not, but cars are made better. The things that we do to the cars are a little bit different as far as vehicle maintenance, but serviceability of the car is improved. I think it's 100,000 miles is a fair standard industry across the nation. You get above that, and you start messing with the car's going to die or cause the accident because of the shape that it's in.
Thank you. Thank you. No need to come up, Mr. McCoy, but I would like to say that you and your staff out there do amazing things with paper clips and chewing gum and duct tape when push comes to shove. I have to admit, and in my past life, having to go out there for maintenance on a car, I just happened to check. I kept the vehicle identification number of the last cruiser that I had 11 years ago, and it is still in service. So they're pushing these cars.
You opened yourself up.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I see the World Herald reporter right now just writing the next headline for the front page. Yeah. So I can't tell you enough about. We discussed this back when I was a blue shirt when we should get these cars out of service. And the Department of Justice standard was used back then, and we just got away from it because of budget crises and everything else that was happening within government and the economy. So if we could get back, if there's any way that we can get back and up that number of replacing, I mean, we don't replace snowplows as often as we should. We don't replace parks and recreation vehicles as we should. I can't stress it enough, and it appears that this will pass, but I think we need to work on getting that back up to the major standard that the federal government suggests that we do. We have a motion and a second. I see no further lights. Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
It's adopted on a 7-0 vote. Now, item number 27, resolution that the attached bid of Toy for purchase of 3 pumper trucks and 1 aerial ladder truck for the Omaha Fire Department is hereby approved.
Public hearing on item number 27 begins now. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon, Scott Ballman, Acting Assistant Fire Chief, Omaha Fire Department, 1516 Jackson Street.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Thompson?
Yes, let's see, City Finance, who's representing today? Go ahead and identify yourself, sir.
Andrew Rod, City Finance.
And Ms. Spacarotella had been talking to us in the past about various ways in which efficiencies in the fire department would be realized. Are you familiar with some of those?
I've been in some conversation. I'm not sure the one you're referring to. Andrew Rod, City Finance.
From your knowledge, and you may not be the one to answer this, has there ever been any discussions about perhaps in the future we're having to take a truck out of service?
That would probably be a better question for Pam. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Warren Weaver, do you have any recollections of those kind of conversations?
Council staff, Warren Weaver. There have been discussions in the Public Safety Committee and in the Finance Committee as well. But I'm not sure how I could answer that in light of what those discussions might be. And I guess I would only say that ongoing negotiations are going on now. Mm-hmm. And I suspect you're leading up to the question of do we need to purchase these or not. I suspect that's where you're going.
Well, we'll call Mr. Bowman up.
Scott Bowman from Fire.
Scott, could you put light on this purchase the same way that Mr. Kyle did on the police purchase?
Certainly, we're very similar as far as the age of the equipment, rusted out equipment, and trying to get the life expectancy out of it. We developed a replacement cycle, if you will, several years ago with Mark McCoy. If we get 3 engines every other year and a truck company every other year, then it takes 18 years to replace all of our fleet. Just some minor facts here. Our oldest frontline pump is a 1997, which is 14 years old. Our oldest reserve pump is 19 years old. Our oldest frontline truck is 2001, so it's 10 years old. We purchased 6 of them in 2001. Our oldest spare truck is a 1987, so it's 24 years old. So basically, the replacement is determined by several factors: age, miles, equipment downtime, cost to operate, projected future costs, previous repairs, parts availability. A lot of times we run into old rigs, it's difficult to get repair parts for them. New rigs are much safer. They have better lighting, reflective material, anti-lock brakes, more fuel efficient, and they emit fewer pollutants. So it's better for the environment.
Okay. The questions that I have might be better asked of your boss, the chief,
okay,
and Ms. Baccartella, but I'll try. Have you heard any talk about in the future we might have to take a truck or two out of service? Have you heard anything like that?
No, I haven't. But I can tell you, even if they did, through negotiations, through the city council, the mayor's office, the union, if they did decide to take a truck out of service, then we would only move our replacement cycle down from 18 years down to 16 years. Because we still try to keep these 15 to 20 years. So even if they took a rig out of service, we still need to stay on top of this recycle, or this replacement cycle.
Okay. Then I have a second question. Have you ever heard of a Quint fire apparatus?
Yes, I have.
What would you describe that as? How do you define or describe that?
Well, it's kind of a dual-purpose piece of apparatus. So instead of an engine company with 4 people on it, an aerial company with 4 people on it, they combined it, and they'll have 6 people on it. Actually, our training bureau did a pros and cons 2 years ago on it, looking at the feasibility, if it saved money, and really the cons outweighed the pros. It just doesn't fit into our system.
Could you give me some clue as to how the cons outweigh the pros? And I ask that because the question is, why aren't we purchasing Quints right now with this new bond money?
Well, they cost a lot more.
Okay.
They're roughly 800,000, 750 to 800,000, so we could buy almost 2 engine companies compared to one of those. They have limited water tank capacity, limited hose bed capacity, limited ladder capacity. They're tandem axle. They're hard to maneuver to get around our city. And 1 mile of maintenance repair on a tandem axle is almost twice the amount of maintenance repair for a single axle. And we're spending already $1.2 million on maintenance and repair.
Okay. I always saw these as potential, not necessarily for the inner city, but for the suburban areas. And it just seems to me that with all the problems we're having right now financially, that there should be some kind of a plan, some forward-thinking plan, where we're looking at phasing a few of these kind of engines in, not all the way through the city, of course.
I know.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I know in the early 90s they looked at it and they thought it was forward-thinking, and a lot of major departments went to it. Kansas City, St. Louis, they're all going back to it. I think St. Louis bought like 30 of them, and it just, the maintenance is killing them, and they're going back to it, going back to regular engines in our areas. So I think it pops up every now and then, trying to think of some ways to save money. It's just this isn't one of them.
You don't think that's a viable option to look at?
No, not in Omaha, I don't.
Okay, I'm still a little bit concerned that we're talking about efficiencies on one hand, but yet we're still doing our old spending habits, and at some point in time, what are we doing differently that's going to help the future, come into being?
In 2006, when the voters approved the public safety bond to purchase this equipment, literally 5 or 6 years ago, well, 5 years ago, they said we need this equipment, and we're trying to stay on this replacement cycle so that we can keep costs down.
Mm-hmm. It's not replacing that I'm against. It's what we replace with. That's the question that I'm asking today.
Right, and there's just no other piece of apparatus out there besides what we currently want to buy, an engine and an aerial. A Quint just won't do it.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you. Mrs. Stothard?
Thank you. I just think it's really important for the public to understand that both of these items, the police cruisers and the fire trucks, were budgeted items in the 2011 budget. The real difference is that the police come out of general fund and the fire trucks are bonded and they come out of the bond money, but both were approved. The reason that we can't bond cruisers is the life expectancy. And a life expectancy of a car, to bond something, it should be 15 years or more. And as you said, Captain or Chief Bauman, that you expect to get at least 15 years out of the fire trucks. Is that correct? Because well, you can come back up. I know a couple of these you said were about 10 years old, but you do try to get at least 15, right?
We try to get 20, ma'am.
Try to get 20 out of them. Okay, all right. I just think that's an important point to make, that that these are paid out of, like you mentioned, the public safety bonds, and those bonds were approved several years ago. Thanks. I do have a question from finance, though. Are these? Oh, I better have. Is he gone?
Pam just arrived.
Oh, Pam's in the house.
Pam Spagratella, Finance Director.
Pam, these bonds to pay for these public safety bonds, have they been issued, and are we already paying interest on them then?
I don't believe that the bonds have been issued for these particular expenditures, but I would have to double check. We just issue the bonds every year, a certain percentage every year, and I believe these are 2011. Is that right, Scott? CIP monies?
Yes.
So we would be issuing the bonds in the fall of 2011.
Okay, and Pam, I wanted to ask you, would there be any financial advantage that you would see of delaying the approval of these trucks right now?
I currently don't see any financial advantage. I believe Mark McCoy may have testified as to the repairs and maintenance on the equipment and the status of these particular trucks and engines that these items are replacing.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Mulligan?
Thank you. Mr. Bauman, could you return to the podium for a moment?
Scott Bauman?
You may have answered this. I just need to ask you again. What your replacement goal for equipment is how many years?
18 years. It takes us. Actually, we'd like to do it in 15 years, but due to limited funds within the CIP, trying to be cost effective, it lasts 18 years.
18 years.
Yes.
And right now, the replacement cycle is how many years?
We buy 3 engines 1 year, skip a year, 3 engines, and then on the other years we'll buy an aerial. So it's 18 years to replace all of our engines, 18 years to replace all of our aerials.
Okay. Maybe I phrased that wrong. Your average age now, I mean, are you above the 18 years? Are we out of your goal cycle?
Mark, where are we at with that?
And the reason I ask that is because, when the question was asked about if we would take a truck out of service, and you indicated that wouldn't help you with your replacement cycle, I was just curious, like, what's our average age today? And, if we did not replace a truck, it seems like we might kind of gain a little bit from that decision. Is that true?
Mark McCoy, City Omaha Fleet Management. If we don't replace a truck, if we're talking a truck, we take a truck out of service, the issue with that is we bought 6 trucks in 2001. So we have 6 trucks that are 10 years old now. And if we don't...
These are pumper trucks.
I'm talking trucks or ladder trucks. When we say trucks, we're talking ladder trucks. Pumpers are pumpers. So trucks, if we're talking ladder trucks, we've got...
That's the same thing as an aerial.
That's the same thing as an aerial, yeah. The ladder truck that we're looking at replacing is a 1984, I believe. So it's a spare truck, but that one needs to go out of service, and we're going to then we'll move a truck down to a spare. So I guess we really, if they don't stay on this replacement cycle, then it just puts us behind the 8 ball, and we end up just like we are with police cruisers. By replacing 3 pumps every other year, what we're doing is replacing 1.5 pumps a year. And there's 25 frontline pumps. So we're replacing 1.5 of them a year.
And that's how many we should be replacing then?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. That keeps us right on.
Okay.
Right
so
on
we're
track.
on schedule now.
Yes, we're on schedule. We got on schedule a couple years ago by implementing this replacement plan, like Chief Bauman talks about, where they went to 3 and then 1, 3 and then 1. If we get off of that, then we just got to make it up down the road.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Bauman, if you could return. And I just want to follow up on the comments that Councilmember Thompson made, because we have, and I agree, we need to stay on top of any type of new technology that we can. And to your point that, you weren't satisfied, or a lot of people weren't satisfied with this Quint operation, there is a manpower savings number that is equated to that. It takes lesser people to man the Quint truck, or the Quint truck replaces 2 other trucks, so therefore your manpower can go down. But just out of curiosity, did you or did anybody from the Omaha Fire Department, have you contacted any of these fire departments that are using the Quint truck, or is this just common knowledge within the industry?
Yeah, it's common knowledge, and 2 years ago when the Training Bureau did a feasibility study, I'm sure they contacted everybody that's using them and the pros and cons of using them.
Okay, because St. Louis definitely was one of the...
Yes, and they're switching back.
They're switching back.
To aerials.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Jerem?
Yes, Mr. McCoy. Did you have figures available, or if you don't have the exact numbers, your best estimate as to what the costs are for what we're spending a year to maintain the vehicles and keep them in service for the ones that these would replace?
2010 vehicles, we've got 4 2010 pumps that we bought last year. The average maintenance cost for those was $2,800. The pumper that we're going to replace is a 1996. We spent $26,000 in maintenance and repair on that vehicle last year. So it's significant. It's, every year that we keep them, it goes up. The 2010s, like I said, we spent $2,800. The 2008s, $7,000. The 2006s was about $13,000. The 2003s, $30,000. And it just keeps going up and up every year you keep them. And not only that, the cost of the vehicles go up every year. The truck that we're replacing, a 1996, we bought that truck new. It was $200,000. These new pumpers are $425,000. So the price has doubled on these vehicles. So every year that you postpone this, it goes up. It's been an average of about a 5.5% increase every year. That's just due to inflation, due to improvements on the rigs, added features that are required, that are mandated. So we've seen a doubling of the cost of the rigs over 14 years.
Thank you. Mr. Bowman, there was a question that was asked before about whether there's been any discussions you were aware of taking a rig out of service, and I guess when you answered it, did you overlook the fact that currently Engine 2 and Medic 2 are taken out of service because of the no callback procedures?
I thought when he was asking about a truck, he was specifically asking about taking an aerial ladder out of service.
Okay, so a separate from what we're currently doing? Okay. Now, as far as the question, thank you, Mr. To Pam Spaccarotella, I take it when you looked at the assessment as to whether there would be a savings achieved by delay, did you factor in the cost of borrowing the money versus what our annual maintenance cost is?
The Pam Spaccarotella, Finance Director, I haven't done an actual analysis for a delay. The only, I will tell you that the cost of borrowing, we're borrowing at about 2.5% now, and the cost of the vehicles increasing every year. As Mark McCoy said, it was 5.5%. My research shows that fire engines increase about 6 to 7% in cost every year. So I think that if I did do an analysis, the cost savings from the repairs and maintenance and the small incremental cost of borrowing would more than offset.
because it appears with the cost of $26,000 a year and $30,000 a year for relatively, well, they're within the decade vehicles, it would appear to me that at 2.5% interest, even at 4% interest, it would make more sense not to delay. Do you agree with that?
I would agree.
Is there anyone here who can tell me, is Toyne the manufacturer or the dealer? Why don't you identify yourself?
I'm Dale Durner with Toyne Incorporated, 104 Granite Avenue in Breda, Iowa.
And I guess I've never heard of Toyne, so is the voice for the taxpayers in my district is wondering, can you, what would we be getting? What do you, versus, say, for example, some of the other names we're familiar with and they purchased from in the past?
Okay, well, you have quite a few of ours in the fleet now. We've had a long history with you, probably right at 9 years, I'd say. Roughly 9 years we've been supplying you with pumpers several different times. I think you currently have 12, maybe 10, 12 units. We've been in business since 1942, so we've been in business over 60 years, located in Breda, Iowa.
Are they manufactured in Iowa?
Yes. About 100 miles from here, sir.
Okay. Well, I came here today thinking that we might, need a time to look at this and to assess it, but I think the information that I was hoping to obtain versus, if we laid this over, my questions have been answered today. The bottom line is that I see it is that we would not achieve any savings, and actually could cost the taxpayers more money if we wait on this. It isn't within the budget. They're needed. The spending up to $30,000 a year to keep these rigs in service, to me, is putting good money after bad. And at some point, we have to step up and make the tough decisions. I think that this process. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
The taxpayers can see that we're scrutinizing the fire department again. That the department has turned the corner on its finances, but the endeavor today to thoroughly scrutinize this purchase, I'm comfortable that we've done that. So I would make a motion to approve.
Second. Mr. Altman, would you like to make a comment?
Not now.
Good.
The statement's been made and answered. Thank you.
Okay. Scott, would you come back up? Just one little thing.
Yes, sir. Scott Bowman.
Was one of the cons in looking at the apparatus called Quint that there might have to be some capital improvements made to the stations so the engine could actually fit?
Yeah, they're quite a bit taller. I'm not even sure if all of them could fit into all our stations.
Okay. So that was in one of the process.
Yeah, they're
part
taller
of the process
and longer.
in review.
Taller and longer. So yeah, that was one of the cons.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate that. We have a motion and a second. No further lights. Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
It's adopted on a 7-0 vote. Item number 31, resolution that the amendment to the Cortland Place No. 2 LLC Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan to change the legal description containing a provision for the division of ad valorem taxes is hereby approved.
Public hearing on item number 31 begins now. Are there any proponents?
Bridget Hadley, City Planning Department, just here to present the resolution for an amendment to a previously approved redevelopment plan of the Cortland Place, which is part of the Soma Rose Townhome redevelopment near 12th and Leavenworth, and just ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Second.
We had a motion? And a second? No further lights? Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem? Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard? Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson? Mr. President?
Yes.
It's adopted 7-0. Item number 32, resolution of the committee comprised of the Public Works Director, Finance Director, Mayor's appointee, and the City Council. Public Works Committee Chairman be formed upon confirmation and approval by the City Council. Said committee would provide City Council with specific recommendations regarding the effect of the repeal of the Omaha commuter wheel tax upon the Public Works Department revenues. And there's an amendment of the whole which changes it to the City of Omaha Public Works Committee, provided the City Council with recommendations on April 26, 2011.
Public hearing on item number 32 begins now. Are there any proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, I'd like to thank my fellow council members for their input on this. I think we've improved this to route it to our Public Works Committee and to extend the date to allow some fiscal housekeeping to come into order as to 2010, 2011 expenses, as well as additional certainty as to how we will fare in the legislature. I think it's very important the taxpayers understand we're being proactive in planning and dealing with the what is anticipated to be some pretty substantial hits to the bottom line of street maintenance, our budget. And so that they'll know we're working on this and we're planning, I'd ask your support. And I'd like to thank the Public Works Committee for wanting this directed to them, and I think it improves it. So thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Stothard?
Thank you. And as chairman of the Public Works Committee, I want to say with the amendment of the whole of referring it back to the committee and then having the date for at least a tentative report of April 26, I will support it. I just think it's important, again, for the public to understand that there's with the Public Works budget, there's a lot of variables that go into it, and as far as the road funding, it carries over year to year, and we get most of primarily all of our funds from the state gas tax and the wheel tax fee, and those do carry over. So, until the 2010 books are closed out and we determine the cost of snow removal for 10 and then do an assessment on the potholes this year and the snow removal for this year, there's a lot of variables to know what our budget is and what we will have to do to make up for the gap. What cuts we will have to make. But this certainly gives the Public Works Director and then all of his division directors time to look at their own budgets, and we will work in our committee and then come back with some sort of a recommendation of what we can do to bridge that gap and refer it, of course, then back to administration. So I do appreciate your work you've done and the motion that you've made, or your amendment to the whole, and I move to approve.
Second. Okay. Mr. Mulligan, you had your light on. Did you cancel? Okay. Mr. Stubbe, you've already instructed your staff to begin working on this to supply some sort of information as close to as you can to some specific recommendations and ideas by March 1st. Is that correct?
Bob Stubbe, Public Works. Yeah, I've already had a conversation with my city engineer to direct his division managers to take a look at their budgets with regard to potential reductions that could come about if the commuter fee is not essentially approved, and so therefore we would lose those revenues. I've already got information from my construction division managers asking for about $9 million in resurfacing funds, which I've already briefed him on that's not going to happen. So, but yes, we will be sitting down and talking about it and coming up with some recommendations with regard to what we can do. We have to keep in mind that we do have commitments already made for cost sharing with federal funds that we cannot give up. We have commitment for some funds going to parks. We have a commitment to Department of Roads that we will do some resurfacing of of state highways that are located within the city of Omaha. So we do have things that we have to commit to. So we have to look at other things where potential savings can be made.
Thank you. Just wanted to assure our audience out there in TV land that this process has already started, and that we weren't going to wait a certain amount of time or hold back. The committee started to work. Mr. Jerem made a request, and that the committee has begun taking action on it. I just wanted to assure everyone that that is happening. Mrs. Stothard.
One thing I forgot to mention is I moved the Public Works, the next committee meeting, from the 22nd to the March 1st because we're not going to have a meeting on the 22nd. So the next time we will be meeting will be on the 1st. But with the amendment that we have, it certainly gives us enough time to meet and discuss
Absolutely.
and come up with recommendations. So thank you.
And my thanks to the entire council for the input on this particular item. We have a motion and a second. No further lights. Roll call.
Gray? Yes. Jerem? Yes. Mulligan? Yes. Stothard? Yes. Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Douglas County Election Commissioner transmits certification of the official results of the City of Omaha Mayor recall election held January 25th.
Motion received and placed on file.
Second.
Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem? Mulligan? Stothard? Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson? Mr. President?
Yes.
Placed on file 7-0. Pursuant to City Council Rule 7H, due no meeting being held February 22nd, second reading, public hearing on agenda items 34 through 41 shall be held on March 1st. On the supplement, additional resolution, item number 43, resolution, administration seeks a buyer to purchase the property located northeast of 13th Street and Burt Murphy Drive. A, Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
I knew this day was coming. Public hearing on item number 43 begins now. Are there any proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Second.
Second. Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Motion adjourned.
We got one more
We
thing
have one
first.
more item.
Pursuant to City Council Rule 7H, the second reading and public hearing on agenda item 44 shall be held on March 1st. Now-
Motion adjourned.
No lights. Roll call.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mulligan?
Yes.
Stothard? Thompson?
Yes.
Festerson? Mr. President?
Yes. Thank you, everyone.